Hi, I'm Carla Tardiff, the CEO of Family Reach, and I am so happy to be here with all of you today. This is a really big day for Family Reach. There are hundreds of summits like this taking place across the country, actually about 450 of them, as a call to Vice President Biden's call to action to double the rate of progress on cancer research and advocacy efforts. I have to say, I think we're one of the only ones actually talking about this issue. Families need more than a cure. Family Reach has been working with patients to pay their non-medical bills for 22 years. And we've seen just heart-wrenching, mind-boggling things to think that in this country, with all of the breakthroughs in research and all of our ability to deliver cures, that we're seeing patients live in their car. We're seeing single mothers feed all of their children the prescription formula meant only for their infant with leukemia. Again, what we see every day is heartbreaking, but what gives me hope is that we can fix this. So, and it's events like today, it's gathering like today, it's collaboration efforts like today that make us realize we might even already be there. So I am, sorry, this is still such an emotional step. When I start talking about families, I start to lose it. So I should probably stick to the facts. The reality is that 1 out of 3 families who has a child with cancer will experience some form of devastating financial barriers. So that is what we're here together today to fix, because those barriers can be broken down. I would like to leave the storytelling up to a dear, dear friend of mine. She is somebody that I met 10 years ago when I first started with Family Reach. She and her son hold a very special place in my heart. They drive me every single day, and I hope they do the same for you. I would like to introduce Raquel Rolfe.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm truly honored to be speaking in front of all of you. On July 31st, 2005, I gave birth to a beautiful and healthy son named Morello. During this time, I worked for a successful asset management company. I had a lovely home, a brand new vehicle, and even had a rainy day fund. But on January 25th, 2007, all of that changed after a routine PD appointment. 18-month-old Morello was diagnosed with ALL leukemia. Immediately, he was admitted into the hospital and started a long-term treatment protocol. After learning what his treatment would entail, I made the difficult but necessary decision to leave my job and stay by his side. I had a savings, and I truly believed I was prepared. After learning about his with trying to manage our home expenses, new uncovered hospital expenses, my savings quickly dwindled, and in less than 6 months, I was in major debt and not even halfway through his treatment. At this point, I now qualified for a small Social Security benefit, yet 9 months later, I found myself still looking for those resources. We fell behind on rent, and after multiple threats of eviction, we became homeless. I turned to my local transitional office. They informed me I qualified for housing, but once I arrived, I quickly learned it was actually a homeless shelter. Without another option and meds due, I tried to settle in, but that was short-lived because the resident caseworker asked us to leave due to the high risk of infection for Morello. Being in the shelter was directly affecting his care. Without a permanent housing option and no time to generate a consistent income, I was constantly ruled out from many services. However, after going back and forth and all the red tape, we were finally approved for a scattered site shelter. A scattered site shelter is a single apartment in a low-income building owned by the state, but it comes along with a number of rules and regulations, and I was once at risk of losing this apartment because we had more than 2 bags of personal property. The situation not only compromised Morello's treatment, but it also put me mentally in a difficult, dark place. At this point, I truly believed I had failed as a parent, a provider, and a caregiver. I kept this mindset throughout the duration of Michaela's treatment. Michaela wrapped up a total of 26 months of treatment, and I was eager to put the pieces back together again. I quickly started working. Michaela was able to join an amazing private preschool program, and within 6 short months, I no longer qualified for any assistance. Happy to find a new home on our own, I quickly found a great place near his school. I was scheduled to sign a lease on October 14th. I will never forget this date because it was the night before, on the 13th, that Michaela was not feeling well. He had spiked a high fever, and in less than 24 hours later, Michaela had relapsed. Admitted indefinitely at this point or until a bone marrow donor was found, I again made the decision to leave my job and stay by his side. I felt defeated and hopeless. I confided in a hospital social worker, but I feared her judgment and her concerns. She listened and sympathized, but didn't have any answers or resources to share. She checked on me daily and asked if I had made any progress, but still had no way of really helping me. One day she told me about a woman who was looking to help a cancer family in need, so she gave her my number. That phone call truly altered the course of our lives and Michaela's treatment. Carla Tardiff from Family Reach was on the other end of that line. After she introduced herself and heard my story, she told me to find an apartment and to prepare to bring Michaela home. Family Reach would cover first, last, and security. We were once again moving, but this time to a happy and healthy environment in a place of our own, where he could heal after transplant and throughout isolation. I felt hopeful and determined to do just that. On March 19th, 2010, Michaela received a bone marrow transplant, and in less than 2 months later, I was able to bring him home to our home. Family Reach continued their support throughout Michaela's 1 year of isolation, and I am truly grateful for their support and their kindness and generosity. I don't know what would have happened without their support. Michaela is now a happy and healthy 13-year-old boy. He is in the 7th grade and living his best life. I believe all of this was in part made possible thanks to Family Reach. Today, I am very happy that my son is thriving, and I am honored to be a part of the Family Reach Council and having an opportunity to give back and be able to speak on behalf of the many families who have experienced what I have, and it makes it all worth it. It just means a lot to me if I'm helping to prevent it from happening to another family. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Raquel. I know it's not easy to go back and relive those days, but I also know you're making a huge difference, so thank you. Raquel is one of tens of thousands of people dealing with this every single day. We often say at Family Reach, we're helping families who literally don't know how they're going to make it through this weekend. The support and the partnership, it's so tangible, and it has such a profound effect on families, not only their mental and emotional state, but their ability to stay together and to access care and to get to treatment. We want to recognize AbbVie for having the courage to see this problem. This isn't a new problem. Like I said, Family Reach has been doing this for 22 years. But for AbbVie to have the courage to see this problem with us and to do something about it is truly groundbreaking. And that's what we're all here today to celebrate. It is my honor to introduce to you now a longtime friend of Family Reach, who will be sharing some incredible news that we had the opportunity to share on the main stage at the Biden Cancer Summit earlier this morning. Please welcome Melissa Walsh, VP of Corporate Responsibility and Global Philanthropy at AbbVie.
I'm a little shorter than Carla, maybe a lot shorter than Carla. Good afternoon, everyone. Carla, thank you so much for those kind words. We at AbbVie value our partnership with Family Reach so much, and it's really amazing to be here with you today. And Raquel, thank you for reminding us why we're here today. I'm going to try to hold it together. It's been an emotional morning, as Carla said. And thank you to everybody in the room who's joined us in the midst of the Biden Cancer Summit, and to all of those of you who are joining us via live stream on Facebook. I don't fully understand what that means, but I'm told that people can see us, so hello. I was preparing for today and thinking about what I would share with all of you and what words I might impart. And then I looked at the RSVP list and I realized that aside from all of those, all of the backgrounds that you all bring to the room today, seeing the agenda and seeing that Raquel would speak before me, I knew that nothing that I would share could in any way share the essence and capture the essence of why we are here today than hearing Raquel's story of what her and her family went through. So thank you for sharing that. But I suspect that if we asked everybody in this room, and those of you on the live stream, how many of you have had either a personal or a professional connection to cancer, we would see most people raise their hands. And that could be in part because of the fact that we are here for the Biden Cancer Summit. But I also believe, as I'm sure you do too, given the backgrounds you come with, that if we ask that question to folks in a coffee shop or a grocery store or passersby on the street, that we would get the same answers. That very few people have actually not been impacted in some way by cancer. I have had family experiences with cancer, more than I would like to have had. And I know, as many of you know, how difficult it is to be the family member facing a patient who's just been diagnosed, to try to figure out how you can, in some way, offer some calm, some peace, some semblance of a deep breath for those who have been told that they are about to face cancer treatment. I remember my grandfather got diagnosed with leukemia. He's such a strong, quiet guy, so we didn't really know how to support him, what we could do to give him any bit of calm. And so I, having no better idea, put together a playlist of all of his favorite songs. So Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett, and I put it on this little iPod Shuffle that I'm pretty sure they don't make anymore, and gave it to him one day as we were sitting at Farber waiting for another long day to start. And after a couple of times of his, not surprisingly, resisting this bizarre-looking technology, the music on that iPod ended up being something that gave him just a little bit of peace throughout the long days that we had at Dana-Farber and dealing with the treatment and everything that was attached to that. That is what Family Reach does in essence. And I know that I speak for all of us at AbbVie when I say that we look at Family Reach and the work that they do as offering just a little bit of music to families who are facing the unimaginable. We just heard from Raquel about the impacts that Family Reach had in how they changed her life and her family's life as they were experiencing that diagnosis. And now they are thriving. And helping families thrive is a focus at AbbVie. That priority is so important to us that when we made the decision earlier this year to commit an additional $350 million in charitable contributions, we dedicated $155 million of those dollars to 3 organizations who support families facing a serious illness of a child. Family Reach is one of those partners. We carefully selected them because of what they do and who they do it for. The organization has been a trusted partner of ours since 2014. I guess you could say, Carla and Rick, that we've been dating for a few years, right? But I think that after today, word will be out that we are taking our relationship up a notch. I think we could even say we're Facebook, what is the phrase? Facebook official. Thank you, Raquel. You have a young child, yeah. Oh, okay, gotcha. So we're Facebook official today. Because of the ongoing support that AbbVie has provided to Family Reach over the past few years, the organization has been able to directly impact over 10,000 people struggling with the financial burden of cancer diagnosis. This has meant helping families stay in their homes, put food on their table, and get their children to cancer treatment. The organization's proven ability to ease the burden for these families, to play a little bit of that music for those families at one of the most vulnerable times for them is the reason why we chose Family Reach as a partner. This is the largest gift in Family Reach's history, and we'd like to announce today that AbbVie has committed $5 million to Family Reach. With these dollars, we will help Family Reach reach more families and reach them faster. Specifically, our gift will enable the organization to expand to an additional 25 hospitals in 25 states and touch more than 4,400 additional families. Amazing, amazing numbers, but that's not it. Additionally, our funding will enable Family Reach to train hospital-based staff, including social workers, to get resources to an additional 200,000 patients, and that will be within 2 years. And finally, our gift will support the creation of 3 new nationwide resources. 1, the Financial Planning for Cancer program, which pairs cancer patients and their families to pro bono financial resources. 2, a national coalition uniting nonprofits to provide critical financial resources throughout a centralized hub to patients, their families, and their caregivers. And 3, financial literacy resources for families to recover financially during cancer treatment and after. Last night, Vice President Biden described these types of partnerships as consequential. And the consequences of the work that Family Reach does for families every day is extraordinary, and we are so grateful to be a part of it. Thank you for everything that you do for families every day. Thank you, Raquel, for sharing your story, and thank you to all of you for being here.
Okay, now the mic goes back up. The theme here is family, and thank you for adding the little marriage piece in there. But the theme is family, and these families that Family Reach supports every day do become our family. And I just want to share one more Raquel story because I am a 2-time cancer survivor, and the first time I had breast cancer, and I had bilateral mastectomies and reconstructive surgery, and my husband brought me home from the hospital after a 10-hour surgery, and I will never forget pulling up our driveway, and there is this woman at the top of my driveway with a little paper bag, and it was Raquel, and she helped me out of the car, and she brought me into my house, and she laid me down on the couch, and she had this little paper bag of chicken broth. She knew exactly what I needed. She showed up, and we are family. So we're not just there for them, they're there for us. AbbVie is now part of our family, and you are there for us, and we will be there for you, but that's how we're gonna change the face of cancer, because this is part of the treatment. So you mentioned what your support is going to be able to do, but in the big picture, we will be able to accelerate and expand all of these incredible programs that we have so we can reach more families quickly. And we can't wait to share as we onboard these 25 new hospitals. I think we're almost there. It's funny, when you call a hospital and tell them what you're going to do for them and their patients, they don't believe you. So it takes us a while to convince them that this is real, that we get it, that we understand it's part of the treatment, and that we want to support them. So we are getting there, and we are close, and we are grateful to AbbVie. So this now closes out our live stream portion. We are so grateful to all of you who were able to join us to hear the story. We hope that you were touched. We hope that you feel part of something huge. All the AbbVie employees, we know this is also in great part to what you're able to do to get us to this point. So thank you, everybody out there and in here, for making all of this possible. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for having me here today. My name is Kira Bono. I am a pediatric oncologist at Dana-Farber and Boston Children's in Boston, Massachusetts. And I split my time. I spend about 20% of my time taking care of children with hematologic malignancies, so leukemia and lymphoma, and the remaining 80% of my time doing outcome disparities research, specifically investigating how poverty and financial hardship impact relapse and survival in childhood cancer in the United States.
Thank you. Robin?
Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Stone. I am the social work manager at the local children's hospital, Children's National Medical Center, down the road in Washington, D.C. I have had this position for about 6.5 years, but prior to that was at the Dana-Farber and Children's in Boston for 20 years. So happy to be here where the weather's a little warmer.
Thank you so much for letting me follow these two. Tim Moore, I'm here. I serve on the National Advisory Board for Family Reach, and I also serve on the board of Just Trying It, which we'll hear a little bit more about through our affiliate program discussion.
Thank you. Again, 3 very different perspectives. So I'm just going to ask you all a question, and then we'll have time for follow-up, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. Dr. Bono, let's start with you. As a physician who treats pediatric cancer patients, how have you seen the financial burden of cancer impact a family's ability to access care?
That's a great question. I usually have long-winded answers. If you'll humor me, if I could take the first minute or so to maybe give a little context with regard to the logistics that we ask of families, which I think really sets the stage for understanding how financial hardship impacts the families who I'm privileged enough to take care of. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So Raquel obviously shared the emotional and personal journey of taking care of a child with cancer. There are also the really basic concrete logistics we ask of you. So I'll run through those very quickly, and I'll use as a case example acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is the most common childhood cancer and what I take care of, so it's convenient from that perspective. So when I meet a family like Raquel's in the emergency department typically, and sit down and share with them that I'm so incredibly sorry, but that their child's blood work shows me that they have a type of cancer called leukemia, and that this is an emergency diagnosis, and that without treatment their child will die from this, I then go on to talk through with them what I'm going to be doing for their child and what I'll expect from them to help me with that. And the first thing that I tell them is that I'm going to admit them emergently from the emergency department to the hospital, and that if all goes very well, I expect that they'll be in the hospital for a month without being able to go home. And if all goes beautifully at the end of that month, and I'm successful in putting their child into remission, I will discharge them from the hospital, and then they will partner with me and my team to give their child 2 years of chemotherapy treatment as an outpatient. And what does that mean? It sounds way better than being an inpatient. What I tell them practically that means is that on average their child will have somewhere between 5 and 10 oral medications at home, that I will expect them to give their child oral chemotherapy at least half of every month for 2 years, that I will expect them to bring their child to clinic to see me for a full day, once a week for the first 6 months. And then if everything's going beautifully, we'll space out to once every 3 weeks, and they'll have a visiting nurse come to their home once a week. And then I'll tell them that that's if everything goes beautifully, but that they should really expect at least 3 to 5 times that they'll have unexpected admissions to the hospital in the middle of the night that will have to happen in an instant when they get there in an hour, and that they might be there for days to weeks. And I'll close that out and say that I promise I'll take good care of their child and that they'll be partnering with me. So that's the context, and I think one takeaway before I say anything about how I see financial hardship impact families is you can see from that there are a couple of very basic concrete logistics families need to make that happen. They need reliable transportation. They need access to a telephone to call and figure out things with appointments. They need access to electricity to keep their refrigerator running for their medications, not to mention the unstated things like having food to feed their child, having heat to keep their child warm, having a safe place to live, a shelter to be in. And so with that as the context, let me share some very quick data, and then I can speak to some specific family things if I'm not out of time yet. So the data that I don't say to families, but that I know as I walk into that emergency department room, are that I know at our first meeting in the emergency department, 1 in 5 of every families who I meet for the first time already is unable to put enough food on the table, or keep the heat or electricity on, or keep a roof over their head. So that's where they're starting. And then I know that within the first 6 months of chemotherapy, so only a quarter of the way into leukemia treatment, that number will actually increase to 1 in 3 of the families I'm taking care of. And that's while they're receiving care, at a major academic medical center that's very well resourced, thanks to programs like Family Reach and others. And that means that 6 months into chemo, 1 in 3 families will tell us they can't put enough food on the table, keep the heat or electricity on, or keep a roof over their heads. And we know that that's because about 1 in 4 families during that same 6 months time period will have lost almost half their annual income, specifically due to treatment-related work disruptions. So that has nothing to do with out-of-pocket medical expenses. That has nothing to do with getting your kid a special treat when they feel really icky after anesthesia for the 7th time. And that has nothing to do with the babysitter at home for your other 3 kids who also need to be taken care of for getting your own life. So those are the data, which I think are compelling and worrisome when I think about how many of our families are facing this issue. So to finally actually answer your question.
I was like, what did I ask her?
How do I see that impact families? Unfortunately, we see that impact families every day. There's the really basic piece of being in clinic, waiting for a child to come and get the chemotherapy that I know they need to be cured, and a family can't show up because their transportation canceled and they didn't have a car to get there. And they didn't have another way to get into clinic. Or there's the family who tells me that they're not able to pay for the oral chemotherapy that they're supposed to be giving their child, not because they don't have insurance, they do, but because they can't afford the copay to go down to the pharmacy to pick it up. And it's either pay the copay or buy groceries for the night for their child and the other children. And that's a trade-off that no family should have to make. And then there are the data, which are separate from the family stories, some of which we published recently and some of which we'll be publishing soon, that are showing us actually that families who are experiencing severe financial hardship, as I've discussed, like poverty or an inability to make basic needs, even when treated at large centers, on clinical trials, receiving the standard of care, are more likely to relapse and more likely to die from their disease. And the reasons for that, we're still trying to figure out from a mechanistic perspective, but as a physician, that's a terrifying thing to know walking into a room, that's a risk factor we need to figure out interventions for, and that's where Family Reach and programs that support social workers and those who seek to help our families every day come in.
And I also just, in listening to you, heard you say that a majority of this cancer care is actually at home.
Yes,
So they need the stability of a home.
absolutely.
Thank you. Robin, as a social worker whose job it is to help meet the many needs of families facing pediatric cancer diagnosis, what are some of the challenges for patients in accessing and utilizing financial resources? And how does Family Reach help with that? You're on the front lines.
So I am, and thank you. So I work at Children's National Medical Center. We are a freestanding pediatric hospital, the only one in the Mid-Atlantic region. We are number 5 this year, thank you, U.S. News and World Report. In our Center for Cancer and Blood Disorder, last year we treated 2,472 oncology patients. So that's our leukemia, lymphoma, our solid tumors, our brain tumors, and our children that went through bone marrow transplant. The interesting thing about this area for me, and sort of a cultural shock, is 56% of our children are on Medicaid. So they're coming in already with huge financial barriers in this region. This Washington, D.C., the capital of our nation, 56%, that's huge. I think Boston was 32%, more of a bell curve. So the financial toxicity, which I love that phrase, you guys I think coined that, is fabulous. It affects our families. The psychosocial barriers and financial barriers include access to food, access to housing, transportation, reliable transportation, not the Medicaid service that doesn't show up at the door like they say they're going to, reliable transportation. So of those 2,472 patients that are in active treatment that I mentioned earlier, there are 5 oncology social workers that take care of their needs. There is a leukemia lymphoma social worker. We recently added a new half-time position, so we have a 1.5, and that is our largest population. For solid tumors, that was my role. I needed help, so I now have some help. For our brain tumors, we have a social 1 MSW, and for our bone marrow transplant, we have 1 MSW. We have 1 family service associate, sort of modeled after what the Dana-Farber had, who helps with, as I have said, you need to be an expert on every resource out there and just feed it to us so we can feed it to the families. When I arrived 6.5 years ago to take on this job, there were several small what I refer to as non-professionally run foundations. It felt like a little bit like the Wild West for resources. There was lots of paperwork, lots of chasing down these organizations for very small sums of money. So filling out a whole family history for $200, it just wasn't a great bang for the buck. And I didn't feel that the families really needed to give a lot of that information away. I think it's private, it's personal. If they choose to, that's fine. But if they don't choose to, they need to be able to have their privacy. Many of these organizations wanted to come on the floor, they wanted pictures, they wanted photo ops, and so that's all stopped. There's an infection risk, there are privacy and HIPAA laws to protect against that. It doesn't happen anymore here. So, I have to go to the next page. Family Reach came along and offered us exactly what we needed. Higher levels of monetary support, quick, fast access. I can put in an application for a family on a Wednesday, and by Wednesday afternoon, I have a decision, and the family can get the check in 2 days. So that's pretty incredible. And the Family Reach application is online. It's straightforward. They're not asking a lot of personal questions. No social worker has to chase down a busy oncology doctor to sign a form that the doctor's actually not going to read. So I think that it is, you guys have presented to us a great way to help our families in a big way, and for some of the very practical needs that you beautifully mentioned, and that I echo all of what you said about what is the families are needing to get their children to treatment.
We know that there's a lot of shame in asking for help, especially when it comes around your finances. And we also know that social workers have way too many patients in their queue. So I think that is really the impetus of keeping it short and simple. Part of it is it doesn't allow a family to change their mind. We hear a lot of times family will say, no, there's somebody worse off than me. So we say, you matter, and you count, and if you ask for help, we know if they ask for help, they need it now. So that turnaround time is really important. So thank you for that. Tim, as a former member of the board of Just Tryin' It, you've seen firsthand how challenging it can be for a smaller nonprofit to deliver sustainable and impactful financial programs to social workers like we just heard Robin talk about. Can you talk a little bit about why the affiliate program means so much to Just Tryin' It and how it helped you better serve patients in need?
Sure. So anyone that hears Raquel's story has an immediate call to action. I mean, you don't have a heart if you don't want to help. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of nonprofits around the country that are born because they hear a story like this. So thank you again for sharing. Just Tryin' It is no different. So the Ryan in Just Tryin' It, he was diagnosed in December of '09 with cancer, and the first kids triathlon that we held was in May of 2010. Just as a quick side note, the Ryan of Just Tryin' It is now 5 years cancer-free, a high schooler, and he's sitting over here. And so we've now hosted 15 kids triathlons. I see one of our North Carolina racers here, who's one of our great fundraisers. And we've given over $2 million to families in need. And so we use the kids triathlons as a way to, A, raise awareness, B, most importantly, to raise dollars. And we are really, really good at hosting a fun, safe kids triathlon, as recently as Alexandria, Virginia last weekend. What we found we were spending more time on was how do we distribute the dollars to the families in need? And we hosted kids triathlons in various parts of the country. We had 5 different hospital partners that had 5 different processes, 5 different interpretations, 5 different legal documents, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were spending time on things that ultimately were not moving the needle for us. And in walks Family Reach, and we were one of those that, I don't believe it, like, I'll, prove it and we'll do it. So, kudos to them. We started with a modest amount of money, and they did everything and more. And so if you roll the clock forward today, 100% of the funds that Just TRYAN raises flows through Family Reach to the patient families that are in desperate need. And how has that helped? A variety of different ways. If you're going to have your power turned off, it's not going to be turned off in 90 days, right? It's going to be turned off on Tuesday. So we went from it taking weeks to get funds to patient families to hours or days, as we heard from Robin. So that's been a huge benefit. The reporting that we get back is spectacular. We can tell you the type of diagnosis of the family in need. We can tell you the median household income. We can tell you that 2/3 of the money went for housing assistance, or 15% went for transportation or utilities or whatever it may be. That sounds like a trivial thing. If you were sitting in front of a donor, a corporation, a foundation, you have to have these statistics. How do they know what impact you are making or not making? How do they quantify what the need is? And so now we're armed with the data that we can go to fundraisers and raise more dollars and focus on what we're good at, which is hosting kids triathlons to raise money. And oh, by the way, we're hosting 2 more new races next year, reaching new markets, raising more awareness. We just hired our first development director, who starts on October 15th, whereas it was a volunteer effort beforehand. So when we think about our partnership with Family Reach, it's given us enormous scale. It's given us a big sister that we can lean on and learn from. And it's also connected us with other sister organizations around the country so that we can ultimately help patient families with more dollars more quickly.
That's great. And we were able to dispel another myth that nonprofits don't work together, that we're all fighting for the same dollar. When you do come together and you do what you do best together, we keep saying this, we are stronger together. We're going to make greater strides if we do it together. So thank you. And AbbVie's support is going to allow us to build that platform. As you heard, without trying, we have 6 affiliates and a few waiting for us to just iron out the details. So we're really excited about the potential. And it allows us to tell a bigger story. This data collection is critical because this issue is new to many. So for us to be able to say, here's what we see in the trenches, that's going to move the needle. I'm not on the panel. I don't know why I'm talking. I just get so excited. I just get so excited about it. Robin, you are a newest hospital member because of Just TRYAN. So this is another great example of how we are going to do more together. But can you talk about what it means to you and your patients to be able to rely on programs from Family Reach? And I think that's an important part because you were saying before it was sort of catch can, Wild West. Family Reach has been around for 22 years. We're not going anywhere. You can count on this money. So how does that differ?
So that makes an enormous difference. When your child is diagnosed with cancer, your world doesn't stop. Everything goes on. The expectations that we have on our families for pediatric oncology treatment are pretty unbelievable. No, you can never miss an appointment. No, you can't change an appointment. No, that's your day to be admitted. Yeah, I'm sorry you're going to have to wait 8 hours for a bed. We're really, really sorry. So I think that piece, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but that piece for our families, the demands on them are incredible. The families, so many of them are single-parent households. FMLA is a great benefit, but it's 3 months. We hope they can take it intermittently. God forbid you're a teacher, because they don't like that. And it's usually unpaid, and not everyone's entitled, depending on the company. So many of our parents or caregivers have to take on their child's treatment as their full-time job, as you did. And that's a loss of income, it's a loss of salary. The other thing I have to mention here, which is a little bit different than the world of Massachusetts that I do miss, deductibles. Deductibles in the Mid-Atlantic are frightening. It's common to have a deductible on your insurance policy of $6,000 to $10,000. And that's every year. If your child's in treatment for 3 years, that's 10 times 3, that's $30,000 right there. So deductibles are a huge added expense, along with travel, gas, parking, pharmacy copays. Then the other thing that I think some days I feel like I'm running a special on is car accidents. The number of people that get into car accidents, either coming to the emergency room, leaving the emergency room, coming in for treatment, people are stressed and they're driving. And I thought I was going to be a great driver when I got here because I'd been driving in Boston. I thought I'm going to be fabulous. Washington, D.C. is nothing. Oh, my Lord, this is the worst. So I think I have had 2 car accidents, families that have needed help from Family Reach for deductibles in the last month. You probably don't believe me when I send in another car accident, but I'm not kidding. So this has allowed our staff to access large sums, the seamless application process, the quick turnaround time, and the huge relief that we see for our families. They can't believe it. They call, they say thank you. They are just, because I think the turnaround time is so quick. And the check truly goes to where it needs to go to right away. So we thank you. I hope I answered that all right for you.
That was great. Tim, as our first affiliate, what impact can Family Reach have through partnerships with nonprofits like Just Trying It? Do you have sort of a vision of where this could go?
Sure. So in simple terms, I think the key lies in 3 areas. 1 is collaboration, 2 is awareness, and 3 is resources. And without the resources, you can't really be effective in the other 2. So kudos again to AbbVie on the huge commitment that you've made, literally saving lives. And so with those resources, on the collaboration side, I already shared the Just Trying It story about being more effective. If you think about the New Day Foundation in Detroit, they have a very similar mission. They provide financial assistance for families in cancer treatment. They have an Excel sheet a mile long and a mile wide, and it takes them a long time to turn around grant requests. And so introduce New Day to Family Reach, and all of a sudden you're building out a tech portal to upload all their Excel data, to improve and streamline what they're doing. And they were struggling with what data do we go to our large donors with, and all of a sudden, we can give the statistics of, 1 in 5 families are going to hit that threshold, and after 6 months, it's 1 in 3. And so now they're armed with data to actually go out and truly fundraise and create awareness in their local market. And so if you go around the country, there are countless examples of smaller nonprofit institutions that have phenomenal intentions because they hear heartfelt stories, and they're under-resourced and understaffed, and a lot of times don't have any employees whatsoever. And so if you believe in the an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, all these affiliates get access to your financial planning tools and financial navigation. And so, when we spread that out, then all of a sudden, maybe they still hit the financial stress point, but maybe it's 6 or 12 months later, or maybe it doesn't happen at all. And so as we think about the affiliate program, it's finding organizations and people that are already doing, what we're doing. They're already our family. They just don't know it yet. I won't take that in any further direction, but it really is just building those bridges so that 1 + 1 = 3 and maximizing their scale. And that's just with organizations already doing what we're doing. And then the awareness piece comes along. So our hospital partners, you know what the problem is. How many more social workers can you hire? Probably not many. Carla has social workers focused on the financial aspect of things. So how do we get our hospital partners as stakeholders involved in what we're doing on the financial aspect? Maybe they can't hire a full-time social worker. Maybe they can give $10,000 to this effort. And if you get 300, 500 hospitals doing that, all of a sudden you're talking about a very, very meaningful, scalable impact. And then banks probably have no idea who's defaulting on their mortgages or why. And so educating the financial institutions about, okay, here is the financial burden of cancer, and here's what we can do about it. Or you go to utility companies that are telling the same story. And so as we think about building awareness and creating these partnerships with affiliates, the sky's the limit on what we can do, but it couldn't happen without the resources.
Right. That's great. And I love what you said about the data collection to see when families typically get into trouble, because a big focus for us right now is how do we reach them before they hit these debilitating financial situations and before they're calling you to say, I'm not taking my meds or I can't come in. So for us to even just to understand and to say to a family, here's what we see, just sort of be aware. And we are going to give you the tools. We'll give you a financial planner. We'll give you resource navigators. We have sort of become the whole back-end system to our hospital partners who are sort of strapped with resources. So, you know, there was a long time where I was shaking the hospital saying, you need to do this, and we weren't getting anywhere. So that's when we looked inside and said, you know what, we're going to build it. And then have the social workers and the doctors use us, so we will become the experts. Because the goal is for when you have cancer, you get a medical care team, and they're focused on your cancer. But now, through these partnerships, we're going to also give them a financial care team, and we will make sure that we are giving them full wraparound services so that they do not end up experiencing the interruption. And the stress, I mean, we haven't even begun. The car crash is a great example to measure the stress. My last question, Dr. Bono, what solutions do you and the other members of your care team have access to?
It's a great question. I am lucky enough to have amazing social workers like Robin and resource specialists who support me and my colleagues in clinic, and I turn to them for all help, so really it's them. But what I hear from them, much as Robin has spoken to, is that one of the biggest challenges when we have a family who needs help with something urgently is that a lot of it is piecemeal, as has already been discussed, and depends on what state you live in and depends on what your child's cancer diagnosis is. There may be more small foundations out there who have money available for leukemia than for a certain type of brain tumor or for transplant or for a non-malignant diagnosis that brought you to transplant, meaning that our social workers sometimes can't even access funds depending on a child's diagnosis. And so when they have access to pools of money that are maybe considered more unrestricted, meaning that they can be used to pay a mortgage and it doesn't matter whether you have a brain tumor or leukemia, I think that's enormous. And that's something that we certainly rely on in terms of helping to support our families through the absolutely ridiculous things that we ask them to do to get their child through cancer therapy.
That was my last question. We are going to open it up to Q&A, but I want to just ask, do you see the tide changing? Does it feel different? Do you feel like that there is change coming, that the conversation is finally starting to happen, or do you still feel discouraged? They didn't know that question was coming.
The tide is absolutely changing.
Okay.
We are in a ridiculously exciting time. I know Family Reach is there. I would say we in pediatric oncology, being able to consider these issues as a part of the meaningful care we provide to children, as part of how we deliver cures and quality of life. And I think this is becoming part of the conversation, and that is for two reasons. One is because organizations like Family Reach, among others, are coming together to say that we need to have an overlay of protection for families that is the financial care team, as you say.
Right.
And that's a new model of care, right? That's
Right.
a new model of healthcare delivery, and that's novel and bright and exciting. And then I think the other thing, because I'm a data geek, that is exciting, is that we are increasingly generating data that let us understand who is at risk for having an outcome we don't want to have happen, which means we can then understand why that's the case, and then we can target those risks to actually reduce those outcomes we don't want. And that is incredibly exciting, and I would say in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be helping more and more families with childhood cancer without question.
Amen.
I'm optimistic.
It's part of the treatment, right?
Absolutely.
I have to comment too, just having experience in both regions of the country, you're 10 years ahead of us. When I came here, it was very clear that Boston was 10 years ahead of the Mid-Atlantic. And I think we have some work to do here. The tide is better. It's changing. It's been a lot of work over the last 6.5 years, but I think this region needs to catch up to Boston and the things that are going on there with the copay issue, with the transportation issues, and with just thinking about our population. 56% of our pediatric population, that's our major pediatric center in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding DMV area. And that's a lot of poverty that we're dealing with, and we need some great ways. Family Reach is a fabulous start. There's a couple of others that have gotten on board, so that helps a little bit. But I think we have some more stretching to do here.
I would just add, people tend to think in terms of community, and if you went to Houston and you were diagnosed with cancer and you talk to the social worker, and number one, God bless social workers, then they would tell you, okay, you need to call the Houston Food Bank, you need to do this, you need to do that, and it's a very, very localized solution for the financial stress that goes alongside cancer. What has been lacking is a national voice and eventually a global voice. And, believe it or not, but Family Reach is the 800-pound gorilla as it relates to this issue before a $5 million contribution from AbbVie. So the burden's on you. We need Family Reach to essentially be the leader in raising awareness. I mean, if you were unfortunate and had Hurricane Florence devastate your home, there are federal programs in place to help you with that. There are no federal programs for the financial devastation of cancer, and it's equally devastating, and
Right.
you might argue a heck of a lot more because you're watching your loved one suffer. So I think that people are becoming more aware at a localized level, not at a national level.
Thank you. And for the record, I am not afraid to be that 800-pound gorilla because I'm not alone. And this is why when we say how much this support from AbbVie means to us, it's just, we're not alone. And I feel like we had been for a long time, but not anymore. So I would love to ask anybody if they have any questions for our panelists. Covered a lot. Are there mics? One on each side. No. Oh, wow, yay! Okay.
Hi, thank you all for being here. This has been wonderful so far. Robin, you spoke about the out-of-pocket costs, the high-deductible insurance plans. That's near and dear to our heart. Lindsay's a survivor, and we fell into the 2 calendar years of treatment, $10,000 deductible per year. What resources do you see hopefully emerging to help those families? I think that's an issue that can push people that are already struggling further into or over the line into poverty. And is that an issue that Family Reach has thought about, looked at? I'm just curious about what you see happening out there.
So we do have a couple of organizations, Family Reach being one, and we have one other one that is the Opens Doors, which is the mortgage bankers, helping with some of this to offset the cost of these large deductibles that people have. $2,000 is a bargain. We had a family walk out without getting care this week because they couldn't afford the deductible. That's a whole nother story, but I think it's got to be addressed. There is not wraparound insurance in the DMV. There was in Massachusetts. I don't know if Common Health still exists, but Common Health is a wraparound insurance for, you could earn $1 million, but you could still qualify and pay the deductible to have wraparound insurance that would take care of your deductibles, your copays, and some of your other high-cost medical gear that you might need for your child. Massachusetts is a state that has it. It doesn't exist in this area of the country. I think wraparound should be some sort of national program, there you go, that would help people manage these large deductibles and out-of-pocket cost.
So what Family Reach typically does in that situation is cover the mortgage to free up some, because we're very focused on all the non-medical costs, but we can have the social worker take a look at what is the biggest non-medical bill you have, and we can cover that.
To offset.
Well, thank you, all of you, for the fantastic work that you do, and it's amazing to be part of our company who would support such an organization. My question really is about, you're doing the things where the rubber meets the road, right? The guerrilla care and getting in there to help to make certain patients have that kind of care. I'm curious about some of the, if you will, softer things, some of the things that you talked about that met you when you got home. Is Family Reach involved in that way as well, to try to take care, I guess, from a more holistic point of view, the person as well?
Yeah, well, they all need Raquel, so we can farm her out. We are solely focused on the financial barriers that are affecting a patient's chance of getting access to and adhere to treatment. And that's a big, that's a big job. So financial education, navigation, resource management, certified pro bono financial planners. We talked a little bit or you talked a little bit about this ecosystem of stakeholders outside the healthcare industry, so mortgage companies. But no, we're not in the home. We make sure they have a home. Raquel?
I actually think I could speak a little bit to your question. So it's not typically something Family Reach will do with every family, but when we first got into our home, Carla showed up at my home with her 2 children and groceries. So yes, they do a lot more. They do get in the home. It's just the relationship you build with them. Some families probably just need that payment and that's it for them and they're okay. And for me, there was a lot of personal connection. There was the voice on the other end that gave me the opportunity to even tell the story, because prior to speaking with Carla, I wouldn't tell many people. So they are doing that. They just don't know how much of it they're doing. But many families are benefiting all around, not just getting that payment met. We're here. Another family's here, thanks to Family Reach for bringing us.
Thank you, Raquel. Any other questions?
Thank you. Do y'all see any regulatory or statutory barriers to the work you're doing at Family Reach? I mean, are there laws that are prohibiting you from getting certain funds to people, or regulatory, like from the government perspective? Or does that depend by state? Or
No, we have not run into that. What we do is we pay their bills directly. So we're not handing money to families. We are wiping out their debt. So we have not had any issues.
I can address a little bit. I think, are you referring to will a family be penalized if they're a Section 8 and have to pay a rent or Yeah, so we addressed that because we were worried. We didn't want a family to be in any kind of trouble for getting any kind of financial relief. And the law is that you're allowed to pay 1 month of a rent if a person is on Section 8 or subsidized housing.
Other things that you guys encounter, HIPAA privacy laws are meant to protect the public, and so we don't know that John or Jane Doe ultimately received the money. The hospital or social worker knows, but Family Reach does not know. And then they don't tell and we don't ask. They do aggregate the data for us, so we know that 67% went to housing and et cetera, et cetera. So we do collect things like what type of disease they have, what their household income is, more on an aggregate basis as opposed to an individual patient basis. So that's some of it. And then I mentioned the federal housing. So, our dream goal is essentially to have, something into mortgage laws that, if you were diagnosed with cancer, there would be some level of a mortgage forbearance for some period of time. With that, it takes political will, but it takes data on our part to be able to prove up exactly what that is. So we're, I would say, not challenged by the regulatory environment, but certainly we have to obviously be aware of it and find workarounds.
And Rick Morello, who is up next, but he's a Family Reach founder and has some input here.
Just want to make maybe an important comment about even a little bit of our history and how we grew, and it maybe addresses part of your question. I think when we knew that we were onto something that could solve a very big problem in a very big way, we knew we needed a number of partners. We knew we didn't have all the answers. So we started to branch out and have partners like large law firms that had lawyers who had to give pro bono hours, and they said, wow, this mission is amazing. And so when we have a question about, are we giving too much to a particular family? Is this going to hit them from a tax standpoint? We then, within an hour, our pro bono attorney is finding someone within their law firm who can come and answer that. When we work with large pharmaceutical companies like AbbVie, we're sitting down and saying, how do we make this work and not hit some tripwire because there's some regulation, whether it's specific to the industry or something in the tax code. So it's definitely something we have to be aware of, because we don't want families either worrying that they're going to get something that shows up from a tax standpoint. And we just want to be able to do things as rapidly and easily as possible. So again, we're very thankful that there have been plenty of good partners who have come in and said, let me help you solve that, because if we're going to grow, if we're going to take on this problem at a grand scale, you just have to assume that these things will occur over time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Speaking from personal experience, I can tell you that the transportation problem is so real in cancer care. Can you tell me what solutions are you seeing in transportation? I saw a press release recently that Lyft was giving rides to the polls, but they're not giving rides to hospitals for cancer care.
Uber.
Are they stepping up, or are we able to work with them on this issue?
So we have Medicaid transportation. Is that any better than it was 6 years ago when I arrived? No. With Lyft and Uber now, and in particularly Uber, we can work with Uber to at least get a car seat in the car if that's needed. We actually pay out for some funds that we receive to get Uber cards, to have them on hand when families say the Medicaid transportation called and then canceled. So that's what we're doing. That's not a great solution. The other challenging piece is we have a number of children diagnosed, and I'm going to say this area wrong, down near Salisbury. That's not the South Shore, but that area of Maryland that's 3 hours away. Transportation is terrible, and there's a lot of financial challenges in that area. So if anybody has any great ideas, I am really open to them. But you're right. It's a problem.
Kirona does.
I would mention there are a handful of companies who are doing very novel work in the transportation space. I've been lucky enough to just start partnering with one on a research project, which Family Reach is also helping to support. It's a company called Ride Health. There are others like it. There's another company called Circulation, which is based out of Boston. But these are companies that provide a centralized HIPAA-compliant platform to allow hospitals or other healthcare providers to order rides using Uber and Lyft for patients. And it can be done in a pre-scheduled advanced way, such that your social worker knows you're coming into clinic on Thursday and scheduled a ride for you through the hospital-based account. Or it can be done in a will call on demand 24/7 way, which is what I'm using currently in an intervention. And so I think it remains to be seen what that will turn into in the coming years. I think there's a lot of promise for the idea of leveraging existing commercial solutions like Uber and Lyft, but in a way that actually works for the healthcare industry. And I think examples like Ride Health or Circulation or others like that potentially could be very helpful.
And Uber does have an Uber Health. We have an Uber Health account in DC. It's just you can't use it for, it's limited funded, but we do have an Uber Health account.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? I think we are out of Q&A time, so that is great. Thank you all. And panelists, thank you so much for helping us take a look. I think just to recap, I mean, this conversation really said two things. One is we've made great strides. The conversation is happening. But the other is there's still so much more work to do. And it is a complicated issue, and there are so many different factors, which is why Family Reach is approaching it from many different angles. But we are on the right path, and I too am optimistic that the conversation is, we got to the main stage of the Biden Cancer Summit. That we would not have done that 2 years ago. So I'm really, really optimistic about that. So AbbVie, thank you again for what you are allowing us to do. It means so much on so many different levels. I love that our families are here to hear it as well. They are what drive us every day. So again, what we're going to do together, the sky's the limit, and I'm so excited. A great way to end this segment is for you all to hear from Family Reach founder, Rick Morello. I worked under him for 3 years before taking over for Family Reach, and was just in awe of him and his family and the fact that they created this program that could be scaled. And when he handed the baton to me, I panicked. I said, I can't do this. And he gave me, it was a bird pushing the egg out of the nest. So I also thank him for that, because through that I found my passion and my purpose. So excited for you all to hear from Rick Morello.
So thanks first to everyone, especially AbbVie, to make this event today happen, but there's so many people that you heard today that are sitting in the audience that make this work every day the way we, Family Reach, sort of set out to accomplish our mission and to help patients and families every day. And I was asked to kind of wrap things up by perhaps taking a couple of steps back in time and to think of some of the key milestones that then may inform also where we're headed. And so I guess I call this last 5 minutes the power and the potential of a paper napkin. Because I think people have heard of companies being started and organizations and ideas being started, and it started on the back of a paper napkin. And in many ways, Family Reach did. And we're all here because of a paper napkin. Now, truth be told, I actually think it was a paper towel. I think it was a Bounty paper towel, and it wasn't a napkin. But if you can bear with me, most of those paper napkin ideas start with some motivation and some inspiration. And in our case, it was out of a tragedy. We lost my sister Christine, who had a very rare and aggressive cancer. It was a Ewing sarcoma. She was treated at the best hospital, one of the best hospitals in the world, at Sloan Kettering, and they tried everything they could to help her. And what she and her husband at the time witnessed were all of the burdens that so many parents and family members were enduring and watching their children being treated and seeing and hearing them say, well, who's going to pay for the parking? Who's going to allow us to come back next week? Are you watching the kids at home? Am I watching the kids at home? And Christine was really just in awe that this could be happening. Another family, the Colangelo family, that also joined forces, they lost their son Christopher to neuroblastoma when he was 11, and this was in the early 80s. So together we were friends, and when we knew that we were connected by this tragedy, we thought, Christine had a vision to help other families. We could see that potentially we can make an impact. So we got together and we started helping families that were being treated at Sloan Kettering and Columbia Presbyterian, and started small. And we started to see little pieces of a bigger mission form. And we then got together and said, if we're going to do this right, and we got together in our backyard in New Jersey in 2003. My sister passed away in 1995. She was in the pharmaceutical industry. She was a rep at Eli Lilly, and she had a great career. And we got together and said, if we're going to do this right, we're going to really need to pull a lot of different people and power together, and we need to do it brick by brick. And we need to put a model together so that if we're good and lucky, years later, we could be standing on some stage saying that we've made actually a bigger impact than we can even fathom. So some of the things you heard today were things like, let's make it so that families who are dealing in days and hours of making decisions, if they need help, let's get it to them within a day or two. Let's come up with a system that a social worker can use through the internet, through something that's secure, that's something that we on the other side can understand and process quickly. So we built those things brick by brick, and we started to see that we could scale. We could go out and reach thousands of patients, not just 30 or 40. And so there were 3 milestones I wanted to mention then as part of this process. So after putting the paper napkin together of what this could be in 2003 and getting people like my brother Brian, who said, I'm going to commit to this as part of my career, the first thing then was to say, if we're going to be bigger and think bigger, we need to bring in talent, and we need to really dedicate to it. So in 2007, Carla and I had already been working together actually in the world of diabetes. My brother was doing some work, some other people in the room were doing some work, and Carla also had an experience. She lost her best friend, one of her best friends, to a very similar cancer as Christine had, at Sloan Kettering, probably treated in the same hall. And he said, Carla, no matter what happens, we need to solve this. So Carla and I got together. We then had breakfast at Eastern Standard in the Kenmore Square area of Boston, and she said, I'm going to get rid of my company that I'm running, and I'm jumping in with you. So I was running it as a volunteer. Carla joined. We had a small group, and we said, we have to think big. Carla doesn't know what thinking small is, so we said, we're going to think big. We need talent. We need partners. We need physicians, and let's really get after it. So milestone 1 was think big and really understand the resources we were going to need to make this happen. The second thing is we met real people like Raquel and the so many other families. I think you know some of the numbers, 15,000 new cases of pediatric cancer every year, another 15,000 of young adults under the age of 30, and every time we see and hear a diagnosis, we know there's a risk that this is going to happen, that financial toxicity is going to come into their lives. So we asked people like Carla, like Raquel, to tell their stories. We were out there telling our stories and talking about the problem, but it was allowing families and giving them a safe place to tell their stories. And then people started listening. But that wasn't enough. So as we are growing and we're adding hospitals to our network and we're getting opportunities to go to corporate partners and philanthropists and so on, we said we need data and we need medical professionals, we need social workers, we need real studies to express what was actually happening and to quantify it. And as people like Kira know and Dr. Safar, who's on our board, know, 10, 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of data rolling around about financial toxicity and its impact on cancer. And thankfully, there are a small field of oncologists and social workers who do spend their time on this. And so I think we provided a small grant to Kira and her team at Dana-Farber. And 4 or 5 years later, as studies take time, there were some preliminary results. And those results, and I won't get it perfect, so I'm not going to try to give the exact endpoints and so on, but essentially, Kira's team found that families who had a child facing leukemia under treatment, those who were in a much more disadvantaged financial situation, were up to twice as likely to relapse early versus those who were in a different financial category. And that, to us, was one of the key data points, along with the work that Dr. Safar was doing and Dr. Ramsey at University of Washington. And we were able to then tell our story and put real data behind it with real medical professionals. And that got the interest and exposure that allowed us to then take our mission to another level. In 2011, at the end of that year, I stepped down as sort of volunteer executive director. We were just getting over kind of the 1 million mark. And we said today that AbbVie gave obviously this incredibly generous gift of $5 million, the largest in our history. I think prior to 2011, the largest was I won a $100,000 grant with the New Jersey Student Council Association. And I presented in Edison High School in the cafeteria. And I thought that was incredible. Exactly. And I was looking out at the 100, kind of leaders of student councils across New Jersey, and they were, writing down notes like, okay, maybe. And so we won that, and that was a big milestone. So your gift is 50 times larger than that moment, but it takes those moments when you start with a napkin. It takes every little step to get to a bigger stage, and we are so grateful that patients, parents, corporate partners, pro bono lawyers, scientists, physicians, social workers, the community, they got around us because we were connected by the same conviction. Paper napkins and ideas do not turn into something unless there is an unmet need. We have absolute unbridled conviction to go solve it, and we connect with others who agree. And so today culminates with the announcement of the gift from AbbVie and all the people from AbbVie that are here. You are part of that conviction. You're a part of that connectedness that we have. And now the vision of where we take this to now solve this in a systematic way, whether it's working with the mortgage industry to get deferred payments, whether it's hopefully affecting policy, or it's just being able to galvanize people in the community to recognize that this is a crisis that needs to be solved. So I think from a founder standpoint, we are incredibly humbled by this moment. We want to help advance where we are today, and we have absolute confidence with the collection of people that we'll be back here in 5 years celebrating another major milestone. And I will actually find the paper towel that we wrote the initial ideas on. So thank you very much, and I don't know if there's any more today. Yes, why don't we have that? Can the Family Reach staff stand up for making a lot, not just today happen, but we also are entrusting you in having a much bigger impact than we've ever seen. Yeah, I think maybe a special kudos to Susan, who was so instrumental throughout the history of interacting with AbbVie. And in fact, we probably interacted with AbbVie before you were AbbVie. You were probably Abbott. It was, okay, all right. No, I wasn't giving credit to the old, but in any case, it takes obviously a lot of people on both sides to make it happen. Susan's been great along the way, but so many more people that we hope we can touch at AbbVie through this very generous grant.